Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 501. Demon-like Judge of Fire. Part 1. You have forcefully entered the final arc. Zhang Huiwen was greeted by the swarm of constellations as soon as finding herself inside the arc. You have entered the hot Naraka. She couldn't make heads nor tails of what on earth was going on here. Why did it have to be hell, of all places? Did I commit a lot of sin in my past life? There was no mistaking the fact that the enemies before her eyes were aiming for her life, though. Zhang Huiwen discovered the pot-bellied but emaciated starving ghosts tripping over each other and rushing towards her like falling mountains, and urgently shouted out, "Uriel!" There was no reply. But Uriel's blessing was still permeating within her. As white wings grew out from Zhang Huiwen's back, crimson corona permeated within her entire frame. Hour of Judgment is activating. The moment she swung her sword, the swarm of starving ghosts before were completely swept away. Evil-leaning constellations have picked up your scent. Enemies rushed in without an end. The ones found in this hot Naraka seemed to be parasitic creatures of other worldviews. Fortunately, she wasn't alone in this place. Huiwen SSI. Yi Hyansong hurriedly ran up to her location from somewhere and stood back to back with her. I guess you've committed a lot of wrong yourself, Hyansong SSI. Demon King, ruler of Crimson Fog, is glaring at you. Demon King, monstrous armed Duke, is revealing its animosity towards you. Constellation, Hell's Parasite, is observing you. Constellation, Flame of Muspelheim, is patiently waiting. Their magical energy would eventually run out trying to fend off all these starving ghosts. Not only that, Hell's constellations and demon kings were waiting for an opening to strike, as well. Behind you. Before they realized it, a swarm of starving ghosts sneaked closer from her rear and pounced with their large maws wide open. However, a cannon shell aiming at these creatures flew in from somewhere and blew them away. Huiwen Yoni. It was from Jihai's battleship. Zhang Huiwen's complexion brightened as she shouted out. Are the kids with you? I think they were dropped somewhere near Sangha and Seal Wayoni's vicinity. As for Pildu Ajusi Dash, we don't have the time to worry about him, too. Gaiawak. More and more of Hell's denizens appeared. The demon counts they fought back in the Dark Castle, and Duke-level demons they encountered back in the Demon World, also began making their appearances, as well. Every one of them had become a part of this hell, to be used as subjects for the next scenario. An Archangel. Kill them, and we can also acquire the positions of Demon Kings. Jihai's bombardment towards them commenced. All the cannons in the Turtle Dragon spat out flames, causing the hell's terrain to transform and lava to spew out uncontrollably. Demons struck by the bits and lumps of lava all melted down, but their numbers didn't seem to decrease at all. Applicable worldview is a domain ruled by evil. Individuals thought to be dead were rising back up again a few minutes later. The spooked Jihai hurriedly shouted out. General Nim. Where are you? Why aren't any constellations showing up here? Unfortunately, no constellation replied to her calling. Not even Uriel, maritime war god, nor the 999th Turnzi Hyansong. They now had to rely only on their own strength to fight. Suchachachuchit. It was then, sparks began dancing in the air. Bot. A roundish portal opened up and Bu popped out from there. Bu. She used to be no bigger than a soccer ball, but now she had grown so big that it was difficult to wrap one's arms around her. All Dakibis grow up by eating fables. Bu yelled out Bot, and curled up as powerful sparks exploded out from her figure. Those dancing sparks then tore open a wall of the cabin. Do-do-do-do-do. Shells burst out of the automated turrets emerging from the torn open wall. Are you alright? Gong Pildu's moving castle was there. His armed fortress now boasted a scale of a complete battle-ready castle after his stigma had evolved once more. And on top of this fortress were Yusanga, Isiol Wa, as well as the two kids. Yoni. Ajusi. Come up this way. Zhang Huiwen and Yi Hyansong grabbed Yi Seolhwa's offered hands and jumped up towards the top of the fortress. Meanwhile, Yi Jihai's longsword gleamed dangerously towards the starving ghosts, madly chasing after them by climbing up on the fortress's walls. In a world where no light from the stars could illuminate them, the members of Kim Dokja Company rescued their own by themselves. Let's get started. Through the authority of the Lotus Pedestal, Yu Seng'a began restricting the enemy's movements. In the meantime, Yi Jihai and Gong Pildu continued to fire away. The Chimera Dragon sat on the far edge of the fortress and fired its breath at the constellations approaching from the air. As for the enemies that managed to break through this pandemonium and climb up successfully, they were greeted by Zhang Huiwen's falling sword strikes. Yi Hyansong's steel transformation protected the skins of his companions, while Yi Seolhwa treated him as he got injured instead of them. This combination had been dreamed up by a certain person a long time ago. However, there was one boy who didn't appear in the original story. Aya. Wall that divides good and evil is exercising its authority. Constellation, ruler of the deepest pit, is bringing its own subordinates. Suchuchuchu. A pitch-black swarm of locusts rushed in and blanketed the skies of hell. These creatures latched onto the incarnation bodies of the demons reviving from their deaths and began tearing into them. Aok. Demons cried out in despair as they fell into the eternal cycle of their regenerating flesh, painfully getting ripped apart and devoured repeatedly. Zhang Huiwen's eyes shone in the light of hope as she observed the strengths of the starving ghosts declining gradually. The one-sidedly disadvantageous battle situation was slowly but surely turning on its head. Although destroying this hot Naraka would still be asking for too much, at the least, buying enough time seemed quite possible. The only problem right now had to do with the constellations that hadn't joined the battle yet. Suchuchuchu. It was then, the stars filling up the skies of this hellish landscape suddenly began moving towards a certain direction. Constellations pounded on the interior wall of the hot Naraka and destroyed it before streaming outside through there. Once the lights from the constellations disappeared, the balance of the worldview also collapsed as well. The starving ghosts could no longer recover and sunk back inside the abyss of hell itself. The companions finally got to take a breather and stared at each other. What just happened? Yi Seolhwa asked that question, but no one answered back. One thing was for sure, though, an event humongous enough to make those stars lose interest in this place was happening somewhere right now. Everyone's gaze was fixed on Gong Pildu next. He groaned loudly and began driving his armed fortress. Fine. I got it, so stop egging me on. Kim Dokja Company too followed after those stars and began moving. Constellations flooding out from all corners of the final arc were flying towards a certain cabin as if they were being sucked in by a black hole. This was their first time seeing so many stars move like that. Even Zhang Huiwen, Yi Hyansong, and Yu Seng'a, too. None could tear their eyes away from this overwhelming spectacle of every star in the sky raining down. It was at once beautiful and rather chill-inducing, too. And also, sorrowful. By the time they abruptly woke up, they realized that all these stars were swirling around a single star in the center. The side of the room could be seen through the large crack in the wall. The Shindansu had broken past the heavens. And with that tree as their center, Kim Dokja's stars were engaged in a bitter struggle. Stop them. This is our Wangsanbil. They were the Korean peninsula's constellations. Kim Yushin, having lost his arm, was shouting out, and Gai Beek was swinging his greatsword towards the constellations. The bald general of justice exterminated the enemies with his club, while Coae one stroke of brush strengthened the allied constellations' statuses by riding in midair with his brush. Josian's #1 sorcerer morphed into a gigantic tiger to fight against Mitra and its turtle, while the slumbering lady of fine brocade summoned all of her warangs to defend against the emperor's forces. There was an unfamiliar constellation among them, too, a star with its eyes closed in the center of this tree. The Shindansu's fable was bubbling up with him as its core. Constellation, Virtuous Wangam, is gathering the probability of the founding gods. It seemed that he was one of the Korean peninsula's founding gods. His blessing enveloped Kim Dokja and the Korean peninsula's constellations, and protected them. General Nim. They could also see constellations atop the turtle ship, as well. The sight of the rolling ocean, brought to reality through stage transformation, that's where Lee Ji-hai's constellation sponsor was. Today reminds me of that day on Noryong. It's my honor to fight alongside you, Jun Jiang. It is mine, as well. The blade of menacingly growling Cheok Jun Jiang collided with Thor's hammer. Unfortunately, the Asgard's forces were simply too many for this small group to fight against. Constellation, Flame of Muspelheim, is summoning its greatsword. Eventually, even the constellations coming from the same hell as Zhang Hui-Wan began joining in, as well. No matter how excellent both Cheok Jun Jiang and Yi Sun Shin were as constellations, it was still impossible for them to stop all of them. But then, a light flashed from the Shindansu, and some things began growing on the ends of its branches. The lights then descended like ripened fruits, containing people the companions were intimately familiar with. It's our great masters. Powerful auras of white lightning, as well as sword light of breaking the sky, dyed the battlefield. Then, Zhang Haiyang and the Transcenders from Urim began roaming the battleground as well. They were followed by Japanese Yukai constellations rushing in, Tengus grasping feathered fans, and Kappas rose up from beneath the water. Even the subordinates of Yamada no Orochi could be seen, as well. You bunch of weak incarnations dare to. Fruits endlessly fell from the Shindansu. Among the spreading white lightning dyeing the battlefield bright, the beings from the sixth scenario began appearing next. For Kim Dajiza, they were small people from Peaceland. Those that fought together with them against the calamity were descending to this battlefield to help them out. Small constellation from the small planet is pulling out its sure-kill weapon, Dragon Needle. Every time constellation swords moved, the small people died in their droves. None of the companions could speak at the horrifying spectacle of the cabin. And at the center of this battlefield, the brightest star on the middle of the mountain made out of dead stars also didn't speak a word, either. Kim Dokja on top of the destroyed Absolute Throne maintained his silence. Yu Young-hyuk, Han Soo-young, and Anna Croft were all fighting there. They were giving their all to fight against constellations while vomiting out blood, scraping every fable they could, and squeezing out every ounce of willpower they possessed. The sky was rapidly changing from the collision of worldviews. Asgard S. Odin, Papyrus S. Osiris, Vedas S. Shiva, Emperor S. Nuwa. Not just them, but constellations from nebulas with unfamiliar names all joined in, causing the sky to brighten up in the deluge of blinding light show. What blocked light wasn't darkness, but another light. The companions subjected to this chokingly bright world felt as if their very existences were being denied. The starlights from the constellations were telling them this, that the history they had compiled so far was nothing. Great fable, Demon World Spring, has begun its storytelling. Zhang Hui-Wan also knew. She knew that those beings couldn't be defeated even if all of her companions jumped in right now. Great fable, torch that swallowed the myth, has begun its storytelling. She needed an even stronger fable, one that could strike down all those blinding stars. The kind of power that could destroy all those constellations. However, Zhang Hui-Wan didn't possess such powers. Even with God-slaying, or hellfire, it was still impossible. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, is looking at her own incarnation. Zhang Hui-Wan looked up at the sky. Her sponsor that had been keeping silent until then was there. She really liked her sponsor. And because of that, there were certain things she felt scared of asking for the Archangel's help. Kim Dokja. Even then, Zhang Hui-Wan had to say it. Please, rescue him, Oriel. Right away, her sponsor replied back to her. All right. Hotly burning flames blanketed the surroundings. She sensed Uriel standing right behind her. Without a doubt, the Archangel must have been using her uniquely noble eyes to look at the same world Zhang Hui-Wan was looking at. Suddenly, Zhang Hui-Wan was overcome with fear. What if Uriel dies in this place? Oriel was just a fable-grade constellation. Even if she was very powerful, she still couldn't fight and win against a myth-grade constellation. But then, a soft hand touched her shoulder. "Don't worry, Huiwana. I'll make it happen, no matter what." The back of Uriel walking past was smaller than Zhang Huiwan's. The latter just couldn't tear her eyes away from that small back. Most ancient good has begun its storytelling. The white wings spread out from that small back and enveloped the whole world as Uriel's true voice resounded out. "Oh, hear me, Eden." Zhang Huiwan felt something shake noticeably inside her. Something similar to a fragment was wriggling inside. It was a weighty fragment that began sleeping within her ever since the conclusion of the Great War of Saints and Demons. Wall that divides good and evil has regained its original power. Su-cha-cha-chat. Right away, angels began appearing one by one. Lower and mid-tier angels, their number swelling from 10, then to 100, then shooting past 1,000 in an instant. Among them were familiar faces, such as Archangel Gabriel. Not only that, the spirits of the archangels who died during the Great War of Saints and Demons could be seen among them, as well. "Uriel." The guardian of youth and travel, Raphael called out to her. The angel who always looked at the world with sleepy eyes, was slowly kneeling down before her along with all the other archangels. "Will you be inheriting Eden?" Uriel didn't reply, but looked back at her incarnation, instead. A certain faint smile seeped into the noble expression of this archangel. Zhang Huiwan called out, but her voice couldn't reach its intended target. The moment Uriel nodded her head, Raphael loudly proclaimed. "Uriel, from henceforth you are our great good dot." Su-chu-chu-chu-chu. The vast corona completely enveloped Uriel's figure. Then, the stunningly brilliant platinum-hued armor settled on her. All of Uriel's status was now manifesting itself, just like back on that day she reigned as the terror of all demons after cutting off countless demon kings' heads. The strongest star in Eden. The moment the demon-like judge of fire grasped her sword, every kneeling angel stood right back up. "Oh, my fellow angels, let us commence with the final, great war of saints and demons." Chapter 502. Demon-like Judge of Fire. Part 2. Odin from the east, Nuwa from the west, and Osiris from the south. We were somehow maintaining a precarious balance within this cauldron of great fables ceaselessly pounding on us. "Your incarnation body is breaking down." I forgot how many times I've heard that message by now. Yu Yunghayak's body right next to me wasn't okay, either. He was left in tatters after taking on the combined attacks from both Odin and Nuwa meant for Han Suyang and me. Our gazes met for a moment there, but he scowled at me as if to ask, "What are you looking at?" before pulling something out from his inner pocket to swallow it. Incarnation, Yu Yunghayak, is using life and death pill. In the end, he had consumed the very last life and death pill Isiolwa gave us. We didn't have any left now. Gua. Endure. The Korean peninsula's constellations roared out like untamed beasts and wielded their weapons. Kim Yushin did, so did Gaibik, too. Guanchang, as well. Constellations that crossed swords once upon a time were now turning over a new leaf together in a single fable under the shade of the Shindansu. Chiok Junjiang could be seen standing at the forefront cutting enemies down. This is why I can't abandon this land even though I curse it so much. Only a few dying will resolve the issue, yet everyone's jumping in to die together. Even Pungbik stayed by his side to raise winds and roared out like a lion. The one who was at odds with us back in the Great War of Saints and Demons was now standing up for our sakes. I can aid the descendants of Hongik. I don't need any compensation. Pungbik's winds writhed violently, and the Hongik-esque constellations rode on that wind to rush forward. Isun Shin's Ghost Fleet kept firing their cannons, while Giant One's arrows pierced through the hearts of many stars. However, the number of enemies didn't seem to be decreasing at all. Where is this Korean peninsula even located in? These measly historical figure-grade bastards dare to. You insects. Sweep them all away. Even then, the Korean peninsula's constellations were enduring well. Great fable, Shindansu, is raising the strengths of all constellations from the Korean peninsula. If the enemies had Odin and Osiris, then we too had a myth-grade constellation, the myth grade that could greatly enhance Shindansu's power, constellation Virtuous Wangam. Constellation Virtuous Wangam says that this is all the aid he can provide. Unlike other myth-grade constellations, his sense of presence seemed quite faint. It was probably due to the effects of this world line. Hongik didn't have a whole lot to do during this world line, after all. And it was quite likely that Hongik's constellations couldn't get out from the Ark's cabin due to the pressure exerted by other myth-grade constellations. Do not show them your backs. We shall never retreat. Fable, Burning the Boats, has begun its storytelling. Cheok Junjayong raised his sword, and Yi Sun Shin continued to command the others. These heroes from the mythical history, who had never yielded to any myth, continued their battle against the actual gods from various myths. Even though their flesh was torn apart and their entire bodies were wrecked, they never knelt down and continued to wield their blades. The Korean peninsula's surface area was getting smaller and smaller. John Wuchi, who had morphed into a tiger to fight, finally collapsed. Coae one stroke of Brush's personal brush broke, and Yi Sun Shin's ghost fleet sank one by one. Even Cheok Junjayong's sword, capable of cutting down thousands of enemies, mountains, and seas, was getting dull, as well. I already expected this. I was supposed to harden my resolve several times over by now. The fable to be written from now on would consist of texts stained by the blood of these stars. Starstream's final great fable is sprouting new buds. Right next second, Thor's hammer came flying in at Cheok Junjayong's neck. It was an attack that not even the Korean peninsula's greatest warrior could dodge. Constellation, demon-like Judge of Fire, is unleashing all of her status. And it was Uriel that blocked the incoming attack. Kim Dokja. Archangels have arrived. Han Suyong shouted out. More archangels descended on the battlefield, accompanied by blinding rays of light. And in the center of them was Uriel wielding the flames of conflagration. It's like, me and Gabriel want to join Kim Dokja company too, you see? Uriel said that to us just before we left for the final scenario. She wanted to join our nebula, and wanted to become our strength, she said. The constellation who has changed the most from the original Kim Dokja Nu. I never figured out why Uriel liked our story so much. Do you really wish to go that far just to help us? All I could do now was to cowardly take advantage of her goodwill. A new great good has appeared in Eden. Uriel's status whipped about stylishly. She was now no longer the fable-grade constellation Uriel. Kugugugugu. A new great good? Myth-grade constellations looked at Uriel and began freaking out. The new great good of Eden, an existence meant to replace the myth-grade constellation, Metatron. Uriel had become Eden's leader, and chose to help us. All seraphim, advance. Along with Raphael's signal, archangels collided against the fable-grade constellations from Papyrus and Vedas. Most ancient good is searching for its enemy. Do you really think that the likes of a destroyed nebula can overturn this battle's outcome? Odin remained unflustered even then, and raised his spear to point it at Uriel. And the god spear, that reputedly no one could evade, Gungnir, flew towards her. Get out my sight. The statuses of Flames of Conflagration and Gungnir collided. Odin's thunderclaps tearing through the heavens, and Uriel's conflagration that incinerated hell, clashed face to face. Two statuses fought intensely, in the battle between two myth-grade constellations where neither of them would normally back down. It was surprisingly Odin who withdrew first. His left arm summoning the spear back was trembling ever so slightly. How pathetic, Odin. Allow me to help. Myth-grade constellations were far more sensitive towards danger than any other existences. They were the oldest stars in this world that hated unexpected variables. And that was why they would never allow any sort of danger to blossom. Myth-grade constellations exchanged glances in less than a blink of an eye and commenced bombardment on Uriel simultaneously. Quack 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 quack. Even if she was now Eden's great good, she still wouldn't be able to defend against such an attack. However, she didn't back down. Even though feathers of her wings were ripped off, and crimson fable splattered on her pale cheeks, her sword didn't weaken at all. "None of you are my greatest enemy." Uriel, who had always been watching our fable from high up above in the sky, her eyes were now shifting in my direction. "Nebula, Eden, is readying its great fable. Dokja. From afar, my companions, including Zhang Huiwen, were rushing towards us. Maybe she already knew the truth. Knew what Uriel was planning to do here. Suchachachat. Eden alone couldn't fight against all of these great nebulas. The strengths of the myth-grade constellations permeating within this arc would even equal the whole of Starstream itself. So, if one wanted to defeat them, one required a great fable with truly incredible probability. The stage transformation is activating. Simply put, a massive myth that could bring all the other myths to their doom was needed. I am the demon-like judge of fire. Uriel slowly blinked, her eyes currently burning up like a real demon's. I wish for an evil that will validate my modifier. As her words came to an end, flames erupting out from her, flames of conflagration, burned through the stars in the heavens. Something began writhing from the other side of hell. The most ancient good called out to its enemy. Right then, Igiliang's eyes suddenly became white. And the demon curled up in hell's deepest pit answered that call. Something resembling the pitch-black storm clouds rolled in from beyond the burning sky. Something that was not Asgard, not Vedas, and also not Papyrus, flooded in towards this side while emitting truly despicable and insidious aura. Constellation, ruler of the deepest pit, is opening the pandemonium. Demons began waking up from the skies of the burning hell. Most ancient evil is searching for its enemy. Wall that divides the good and evil is drawing out its theme. The master of pandemonium, biding its time for an innumerable amount of time, finally revealed its true strengths in place of the absent demon kings. And so, the two representatives of good and evil began colliding with myth-grade constellations, caught in the middle. And there was an ancient being observing that great battle between good and evil. The chimera dragon, flapping its wings in Shin Yusung's side, suddenly began emitting light from deep within its body. It was a scene that happened in the original, too. Finally, her dragon was evolving into an ancient dragon. Soon, radiant golden luster blinded everyone. The chimera dragon, now enjoying the status of a complete ancient dragon, roared out to the heavens above. The dragon call. The howling of a dragon that summoned its kin by sacrificing its own life. Guayawa. And from the other side of the darkened sky, howls of dragons could be heard. Traces of electricity and flames danced everywhere. All dragons living in this world heeded the chimera dragon's call and were flying over here. The stage transformation's degree of reproduction is rapidly rising up. Rather than tearing into the stars, the dragons started fighting tooth and nail against each other, instead. Even the gold dragon's heart, replacing my original heart, was writhing powerfully as well. It was a sight we all witnessed back in the Great War of Saints and Demons. A dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns will awaken from the center of the hottest hell. He is the dragon among all dragons. The leader of dragons born in the center of chaos, the oldest hatred in this world. The Dragon's Festival, the riot of dragons taking place in the hottest place in hell, had commenced. Myth-grade constellations belatedly realized what was going on here and cried out in sheer astonishment. See, could these bastards be? Make them stop. Everyone here knew very well what kind of calamity would crash the party if another great war of saints and demons took place here. You bastards dare. The great Dakibis, not many remaining now after Baihyung's sacrifice, revealed themselves inside the ark. The great Dakibi, Garong, with its horn now broken off, was yelling out loudly. Suppress that great fable's probability. Great Dakibis activated their authorities, and the myth-grade constellations inside the ark used up their own coin reserves, as well. Constellation, Master of December 25th, does not want Great War of Saints and Demons. Constellation, great mother god who created man out of earth, does not want great war of saints and demons. Constellation, one-eyed father, does not want great war of saints and demons. Constellation, master of Abydos, does not want great war of saints and demons. The probability of the unfolding stage transformation was being suppressed as an incredible amount of coins got injected simultaneously. The star stream's probability flowed towards the direction the majority wanted to see. And at this stage, there didn't seem to be anyone out there capable of going against the will of those possessing the most amount of coins in this world. With an exception of one being Dot. I heard the soft hum of an engine coming from behind, followed by the familiar scent of a cigar. "You've come." The mass production type maker stood on my side and spoke up. "This is the type of fable that I love the most." He also said something similar back then, when we first met during the Gourmet Association. He was the constellation that loved all the fables of this world. He formed an unreadable expression while looking at the fable of great war of saints and demons writhing violently before his eyes. He was also a constellation that spent his life mass-producing SSS rank items. It has taken a really long time. My apologies. Honestly speaking, I felt puzzled when I first heard what my would be. I believed that no such would ever come knocking at my door. And are your thoughts different now? The mass production type maker wordlessly stubbed his cigar and killed it off. He then watched the fable of the great war of saints and demons with me. The history of all our battles was now being recreated in that place. The mass production type maker laughed out. At the very least, I think I understand one thing, why my fable coaxed me to amass such a large reserve of coins until now. Coins began floating up from his fingertips. There were so many that I couldn't even dare to attempt at counting them. It seems that it was for the purpose of completing the one single stage. Coins, along with his life itself, got sucked up into the sky. And his coins collided with the will of the numerous constellations. The myth-grade constellations roared out in anger, and the mass production type maker calmly opened his mouth. The constellation possessing this world's greatest authority replied to them. "Oh, my dear constellations. I apologize, but I simply must see this stage." And when all of his coins were injected into the probability in the air, its powerful storm began enveloping the entirety of the arc. Meanwhile, the mass production type maker's body suddenly aged at a visible rate. Constellation, mass production type makers is depletion. The deficient probability has been satisfied. Great Fable, Season of Light and Darkness, is being completely recreated on this stage. Su-cha-cha-chat. A horrifying howl exploded out from the sky. Along with that explosion, dragons fell towards the ground. I quickly pulled both Han Soo-young and Anna Croft closer, and along with Yu Young-hyuk, evacuated towards where our companions were. Finally, the last verse of all the scenarios, the destruction of all constellations, was fast approaching us. Do not get sucked into this measly little great war of saints and demons. We've won against many so-called great apocalypses time and time again, and got this far. The great fables of the myth-grade constellations began waking up all at the same time. Every great fable found in this world held out, as if they were unwilling to be overwhelmed by the scale of the great war of saints and demons. However, it was too late now. This dragon will look at the heaven once, and at earth once, and will strike with its tail. Stars will fall from that single tail flick, and a direction of the world will disappear. A pair of eyes began gleaming from within the darkness. Han Soo-young shuddered uncontrollably the moment she heard the violent howling of a dragon. Kim Dokja. Could this be? It is. You crazy? If you wake that thing up again now, We aren't planning to wake that guy up. I looked at Yu Sang-ah sitting in the lotus position in the corner while focusing all of her mind on something. Sweat drops trickled down her forehead. Walnut decides Samsara is maintaining the seal on the Apocalypse Dragon. As long as the successor of Sakyamuni was alive, the sealed Apocalypse Dragon would never be summoned to this place. The flustered Han Soo-young asked me again. Then, what? Don't you get it? She looked up at the dragons falling from the sky with a dazed expression. The Dragon's Festival was a ceremony to decide the strongest dragon. And the single dragon that managed to survive until the end would become the final dragon of Revelation. Since when did it start? Han Suyang's left arm was trembling like crazy. The new final dragon of Revelation has been selected. Kuuhu. Eventually, a massive dragon revealed itself through the destroyed ceiling of the ark. It was so huge that it'd easily tear apart your regular giant star to shreds. Bewitching black flames were dancing on the jet black, slick exterior that had shed its last layer of skin. Constellation Abyssal Black Flame Dragon has incarnated into the final arc. He's the Apocalypse Dragon now. Chapter 503. Demon-like Judge of Fire. Part 3. The Final Dragon of Revelation. The great calamity that decides the end of great war of saints and demons as well as the most horrifying apocalypse of Starstream itself. The stage transformation S degree of reproduction has exceeded the percentage limit. The lightning bolts powerfully tearing through the storm clouds now took on a different hue than before. Both Asgard S. Odin and Papyrus S. Osiris jaws dropped in sheer astonishment. Black Flame Dragon. The Apocalypse Dragon's gaze lingered on Han Suyang's face for the briefest moment in time. It's possible that Uriel isn't the only constellation different from the original dot. Back in the original novel, this guy was the constellation backer of the Demon of Delusions Kim Nam-woon. He was the leader of evil dragons that represented the absolute evil, not to mention the ruler of the nebula, Black Cloud. He raised his head high up to the sky and cried out. The entirety of Starstream shuddered from the screech that announced the arrival of this world's final pages. Constellation Abyssal Black Flame Dragons is something that can't be found. I had read what his was from the original novel. His description showed up when he became Yu Young-hyuk's ally for a little while during the 1863rd turn. The evil dragon suffering from the worst possible depression in this Starstream. The reason why the Abyssal Black Flame Dragon believed his age to be 15 was simply that he'd not be able to continue on if he didn't. A life stretching for thousands, no, tens of thousands of years, made an originally solitary dragon into such a creature. In order to stop itself from decaying, he chose not to age. He chose not to lose his curiosity of the world. He chose to torment incarnations or play bizarre pranks. And for his final prank, he even chose to betray the absolute evil, too. He stood on Yu Young-hyuk's side and while mocking the Starstream, breathed his last. Constellation Abyssal Black Flame Dragon has reached his. What about this world line, though? Did he finally manage to find his within this empty universe? Constellation Abyssal Black Flame Dragons is pureness. The Abyssal Black Flame Dragon looked at me and smiled. His childlike eyes were now dyeing the world in the night of apocalypse as if he was satisfied by the role he had found. Fully satisfied probability has recreated the Apocalypse Dragon in the final scenario. Great Fable, Season of Light and Darkness, has achieved perfect unity with the scenario. The myth-grade constellations began roaring at the top of their lungs at the reproduction of Apocalypse Dragon. This is impossible. Every constellation alive was well aware of the fable of Apocalypse Dragon, the great calamity capable of destroying a section of Starstream with nothing but its first tail flick. Stop him. Kill him before the tail flick commences. The clearly freaking out myth-grade constellations ungainly lost their composure and issued their orders. Han Suyang, Yu Young-hyuk and I all looked up at that spectacle. None among these myth-grade constellations have experienced the Apocalypse Dragon before. Because, their peers that did fight it had all perished back then. After all, these bastards had been hiding inside this ark, the safest place in the entire world, and watched the moment of the Apocalypse Dragon being unshackled as if it was a form of entertainment. In other words, they had absolutely no clue what this fear was like, the terror, and what it meant to risk their lives. Yu Young-hyuk next to me asked a question. You have been preparing for this moment all along, haven't you? I slowly nodded my head. That's right. From the moment the first scenario began, I had been calculating a certain something. Just how much fable would I need to compile in order to massacre the constellations in the final scenario? I couldn't get to an answer. A human's lifespan was short, but stars were eternal. Since our starting lines were different, the battle would never be fair, and most important of all, I wasn't a regressor like Yu Jung Hyuk. I couldn't live a life of 1863 regression turns and fight them afterwards. It was wrong to even think about compiling fables to fight them. Whether it's a legendary or mythical fable, you can't suppress those beings in terms of pure status, no matter how many fables you manage to amass. And so, this is what you came up with. I nodded my head and stared at Kim Yu-shin and Gaibik fighting together with Shindansu behind them. Kim Dokja found the answer to this battle within the stage transformation. The stage transformation, although it was imaginary, this power would grow closer to reality as probability expanded. I confirmed the potential of this power when defeating Surya back in the Demon King selection battles, and the first outlines of my plan formed in my head when we defeated Olympus back in the Gigantomachia. And I grew even more confident after we experienced the Great War of Saints and Demons, then won the journey to the West. The more they succeeded in the impossible odd scenarios, the greater the power of reproduction their great fable possessed. The air they breathed, the emotions they felt on that day, the fear humans felt while facing the apocalypse, their eyes fixed to the outpouring of the stars. And now, it was the turn of the constellations to feel the fear people felt on that day. Great Fable, Season of Light and Darkness, is continuing on with its storytelling. The Apocalypse Dragon's first tail flick commenced. Quack 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 quack. The Apocalypse Dragon's tail flick was divided into 3 separate shockwaves. The first was electrical wave, the second was heat wave, while the true tail flick and the third wave was the wave of chaos. Kuaa! I shall block this. Thor, who had defended against the electrical wave with me back then, stepped forward. He must have felt confident this time too, since he had dealt with it in the past. Unfortunately, that was a terrible misjudgment on his part. Thor's scorched black figure crash-landed from the air. The reason why he could defend against the electrical wave back then was because Dionysus, me, and my master were there to aid him. However, no one was helping him out this time. Just as the fear-stricken constellations turned around to run, all the myth-grade constellations unleashed their statuses. Along with the incredible storm of aftermaths, all the stars in the sky flickered unsteadily. And then, the exploding electrical wave blanketed entire surroundings like fine fog particles. Once the view cleared out, one could clearly see that the Apocalypse Dragon's electrical wave had been weakened by a great deal. And it only amounted to this much? Suchachachut. The one who defended against the electrical wave was the leader of Asgard, Odin. His dignified beard, which was his pride and joy, was scorched black. His clothing had all melted down, too, leaving him buck naked. He revealed his skin, horrifyingly deformed by that wave, and laughed out loudly. With such measly little shususususut. Right in the next moment, Asgard's constellations manning his side began scattering away like dust. Their lives were exhausted completely while dealing with the probability necessary to offset the shockwave. Odin's eye grew large from shock. Gray-colored powder spread about helplessly in the air. With that one attack alone, half of Asgard was wiped out. Kuuhu. It was a similar situation with Vedas and Papyrus as well. Nuwa. Osiris belatedly understood the severity of this situation and looked behind while shouting that name out. That was where he discovered Nuwa leading the forces of Emperor to withdraw from this cabin. She had recognized the unfavorable battle situation and prepared to retreat from very early on. Gong Pildu. After I called out, Gong Pildu's castle moved. His armed fortress accurately blocked off the path leading to the Emperor's worldview, and its turrets began spitting out flames. You're going nowhere. At same time, the Apocalypse Dragon's second shockwave exploded out. The flames of the heat wave, boiling over from the deepest part in hell, began melting down the constellations in the air. Bureau. How long are you going to sit back and watch? Odin's scream prompted the great Dakibi Garong to raise its hand while Fable endlessly gurgled out from its mouth. Fine. If you wish to use the stage transformation, then, suddenly, I felt this ominous foreboding. Suchuchuchu. The stage transformation's authority was now in full display. A powerful deluge of sparks caused me to hurriedly look behind, only to discover blood trickling out from Yu Sengha's lips. Sengha SSI. The lotus pedestal spinning next to her suddenly developed cracks. She vomited out a chunk of blood and spoke in an ashamed voice. I stopped one from coming out, but a portion of the other has. There were two great beings sealed away in the Isle of Reincarnators by Sakyamuni. One of them was the Apocalypse Dragon, while the other was. Wall that decides samsara is violently writhing around. Wall that decides samsara is unveiling its theme. Existence from another world is breaking past the wall's seal and has been recreated in this world. Suchachachat. Black fog was distorting the heavens as it rushed in here. Countless eyes could be seen beyond that dark fog. It was Starstream's cleaner, the one that should have been imprisoned within the eternal darkness after Sakyamuni had sealed it away. Oh, the indescribable distance. I realized what the Dakibis were trying to do. They were trying to use the same method I used back in the Great War of Saints and Demons to stop the Apocalypse Dragon. And so, the two calamities representing the absolute worst-case scenario of Starstream collided. Haha, ha ha ha. You shall never reach the final verse. You shall never dash. With those final parting words, the heads of all the great Dakibis exploded. The indescribable distance sucked in their fables and violently writhed. And then, this outer god that had earned the great Dakibi's fables, and the black flame dragon that earned the power of apocalypse, glared at each other. Third shockwave is now commencing. The apocalypse dragon's tail moved. The calamity moved very slowly, its speed very measured but assured. Niwa grew impatient and yelled out loudly in the air. Just what are you all doing? Fushi. Shenong. All of you damnable 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, just for how long are you planning to enjoy the slumber of abyss? Kugagagugu. Niwa's true voice managed to wake up the emperor's ancient constellations. The blessings from the myth-grade constellations that hadn't shown themselves until now completely enveloped Niwa's incarnation body. The truly explosive rise in her status forced going Pildu's armed fortress back. We needed to stop her. We couldn't afford to let them escape back to their own worldview. Great Fable, Journey to the West, has begun its storytelling. The Nebula Emperor's Great Fable began its story. Niwa transformed into a gigantic Amugi, and her flames began amassing within her maw. Just before the Emperor's constellations gathered their fighting spirit and rushed towards us. Kururum. Rumble. Lightning bolts struck down from the sky and Niwa screamed loudly. Great Fable, Liberator of Forgotten Ones, has begun its storytelling. The sight of Tong Tian spread out in an instant, and an existence draped in the golden tiger hide defended me. Kwa. He was the sole existence capable of standing up against the Emperor's vast myth-grade constellations. Constellation, most ancient liberator, has incarnated into the final arc. He was also a star that became my brother. Mai Hawang is looking at you. Bai Moen is looking at you. Duzhan Shengfo is looking at you. All of the Sun Wukongs addressed me. Great Sage, Heaven's Equal, is turning his back to you. Go now, Magneya. We could see the Apocalypse Dragon's tail colliding against the indescribable distance in the distant sky. We all knew very well the likely outcome of that collision. He dreamed of every star's destruction. But, did he really wish for such a result? I had never forgotten the final moment of the 1863rd regression turn. The great sage turned around and rushed towards the Emperor's constellations. Even before I could reach out, Yu Yunghayok and Han Suyang grabbed me and ran away. Gong Pildu continued to shout something, or rather, while Isiolwa was pulling out all the recovery medicines in her possession. I couldn't tell whether Ihian Song's forged steel covered us first, or the pure white flash of light managed to blanket the world before that. It felt like my whole body was melting down from the incredible heat, only to become deathly cold as if I was exposed to a cold snap. When I came to, we were already cast outside the cabin. Fables leaked out indiscriminately from the gaps of the crumbling walls, painfully singing the end of the stars. The prop storage's door hadn't been closed yet. Ash drifted out through the half-open doorway. The fourth wall is violently trembling. Maybe, somehow, everyone inside that cabin was. Shusut. There was a faint presence of someone beyond it, and Han Suyong's voice entered my ears almost at the same time. Kim Dokja? I crawled towards the door. My heart didn't want to stop pounding away. I barely managed to reach the rim of the doorway, and saw someone standing there. Torn white feathers were cascading downwards, one by one. My lips bobbed up and down. I wanted to say something. But in place of my mouth wanting to open, Uriel slowly bent down first. Dokja. I couldn't hear her true voice properly. I tried so hard to get back up as Uriel reached out to me. And her white hand brushed past my face as if she was stroking my cheek and brows. I saw the enemy constellation standing back up from beyond Uriel's broken wings. Some stars somehow managed to survive even from this utterly horrifying calamity. The stage transformation has concluded. I could no longer sense the status of the indescribable distance. I then saw the huge body of the abyssal black flame dragon now lying unmoving on the floor, and the constellations from the great nebulas pouncing on top of him, as well as demons tearing into the wings of archangels. Countless enemies were approaching Uriel. Yuri. I was about to open the door, grab my sword, and cut them down for Uriel. However, the door didn't open. Uriel held fast the doorknob from the other side and didn't let go. Zhang Huiwan's cry, as desperate as a real scream, resounded out. Uriel. Hurry! Hurry and get out of there, dash! It's okay. I didn't want to hear what she was about to say next. Uriel smiled at me. You guys, you've only seen up to this far in the story, that's all. The cabin's door was closed shut. You have accomplished a feat that no star in Starstream has ever managed to accomplish. The story beyond the door could no longer be heard. Some of us screamed out, while some despaired. The ark seemed to tilt out of balance, before it crashed against something along with a loud boom. I rolled around on the floor ungainly. The vibration of the ark had already come to a stop by the time I lifted myself up, the wave of vicious dizziness washing over me non-stop. I didn't have any energy left to even stand. I could only manage to raise my head and look ahead. My eyes followed after the broken partitioning walls to discover a new location. That unknown something colliding with the ark had become connected to the vessel's interior. All the stars in Starstream will never forget you. None of those stars were looking at us now. But there was one existence remaining still looking at us. King of Stories is waiting for you. A yellowish mineral-like object rolled down the slope of the destroyed ark. I recognized what that was. That gemstone was what we had been searching for inside this ark all along, after all. However, neither me nor my companions had any energy left to focus on that gemstone. I left the ark and slowly scanned our surroundings. We were greeted by a wall so vast that its ends couldn't be seen. Fables leaking out from the ark was permeating into that wall. And so, Kim Dokja has finally arrived at his destination. That wall was now talking to me. The end of all these stories. The final wall was right before their eyes.